And we're live with our 291st episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on social media, joined by my co-host, Seth Law at Seth Law on social media. Seth, say hi.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. Ken and I are super excited to be here today. We've got a special guest, Sean Varga, and we will dig into his background and everything. Sean here shortly. Before we launch into the bulk of the episode, I did want to highlight a couple of things. First of all is Ken and I will be teaching our practical secure code review course, the virtual version, next Thursday and Friday. We still have a couple of seats available. If you've been looking for an opportunity to dig in and improve your secure code review skills, this is your opportunity to do that. This is the first time that we've taught it in a few months. So get in now, basically. With that as well. So that's at training.absoluteappsec.com. We also have another course that we will be offering at DEF CON this year as part of DEF CON trainings, our Harnessing LLMs for Application Security course. This one, hard-earned knowledge and practice and experience of using LLMs to do application security tasks, from code analysis to dynamic analysis, how we actually interact with them, how we do prompt engineering, all the things that you've talked about, using tools, MCP servers. It's all in there. That's a good 2-day course. Again, hard-fought knowledge, hard-fought experience that we're going to share, with the community as it is. Outside of that, we did release a small video on LinkedIn and YouTube that is a snippet of the secure code review course. Ken, I just wanted to link to that really quick before we start today. Let me pull that up. Let's see, videos.
I saw that yesterday. Actually, I was watching. I was like, "Oh, what is this?" I saw the LinkedIn advertisement on it, and I was like, "What did we do here?" And then you all had chopped up a clip from one of our trainings, our recorded trainings. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it is, right? Like, it's just a small snippet of one of the trainings, and it looks like it's only on you. It's only on LinkedIn right now, so I will link that post really quick. I can figure out how to do that. And this is how my life is going today.
And what's cool is, say, while you're finding that link in that link he's going to share in that video, it's pretty cool. We show like this dot. It's funny, Seth and I had this same .NET related code flaw, but he had a dynamic testing only environment. I had both static, so I had source code and I had the live running website to test. So I had a little bit deeper in terms of access to the code, whereas Seth didn't. So we kind of show like how he found it, and then how I found it, how the problem actually like surfaced, and how you would find similar problems in code beyond just .NET and other code bases. So
yep. It's good, and it's a good snippet of what we teach in the course, right? Like the way that we go about doing authentication, authorization, checks, what it is we're looking for, how we prioritize things, why we prioritize things, right? There's a lot of manual effort that's gone into this over the years. So good snippet of that. I'll make sure that gets posted to YouTube as well, just so we have that up and people can reference it from wherever. But cool.
And I don't know if you mentioned it, but our DEF CON course is 100% locked in. So that is definitely happening.
That's definitely happening. That one's not going to get, sometimes those courses get pulled about a month before because they don't have enough seats. But we're definitely going to be there and teaching. So we're excited about that one. It's the first time that we've done the LLM course since I think early this year, or was it late last year, Ken?
Yeah. Plus this is more in depth. So I'm excited.
Yeah. I'm excited. Yep. New lessons learned, new techniques, new things that I'm using, as a consultancy that are speeding up our process, right? Like, I've even got, a couple other things to add to it. So it's going to be, I fear that we won't be able to cover everything in 2 days, but that's always the case in our courses. So.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I did want to just real briefly before, because I want to introduce Sean, but I want to introduce Sean in the sense of like how I know Sean and how I first met Sean. So like Sean Varga, who's with us, and we'll have him introduce himself and give a little background. But I'll just give my personal take. When I was at GitHub, Sean was my point of contact from Secure Code Warrior, and I mean, you talk about like sometimes you interact with somebody who like in advance kind of knows what things you're going to be concerned about, or so basically somebody that can anticipate your needs, the problems that you might have, who consistently communicates and ensures that the things are going the way they're supposed to go. um, Highly professional. And so that's where it started with Sean and I kind of communicating. But then over the years I've kept in contact with Sean, and tried to just keep him. I like to think that sometimes you collect people, as in terms of like it's like Seth. You and I worked together in our first, and it was like that was awesome. I was like, this is the guy I want to always have in as a friend, as a colleague, as a whatever, for my career. And like Sean's one of those kinds of people. I would say is like, he's one of those people I would always want to have in that circle. So anyways, huge Sean fan. That's where I'll no pressure now, Sean. But anyways, so that's how I first met Sean. Continue talking, and now he agreed to come on the show. And yeah, I figure we could just kind of get your welcome, Sean, and tell folks about yourself.
Yeah, I don't know what to say after that. I'm like speechless. I feel like you're my father speaking at like my wedding or something, and you're talking about me.
No, likes to put people on the spot. Yeah.
No,
Makes you blush.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, that's what I live for, and so I really appreciate you saying all those kind of things, and it's right back at you. I mentioned to you both that I had the wonderful opportunity to speak on Chris Romeo's podcast, the Application Security Podcast, a couple weeks ago that we posted next week sometime. And I was saying to you all before this that I did an intro there, but I didn't go super deep into like my background and why I got into sales. And I think it kind of speaks to the heart of, what I try to do and what I've focused on. So as I've gotten older, and you always are iterating to excellence in sales, I think a lot about when you meet somebody face to face, you meet over some food, you break bread. I really try to understand someone's childhood. Where were they raised? How were they raised? What were their parents like? Understand where they came from, their origin story, and then where they want to go, right? Because I think that tells you ultimately about what matters to them. Because that's how we make decisions. And I remember I learned that distinctly. I didn't use it at all at the time. I was so young and such an idiot. But at RSA Security, my first ever job, what was really cool about that is that was back in the day where EMC RSA would do EBCs, executive briefings, and bring in, the who's who of clients, and then rally through all of the product managers and thought leaders in front of all the different people. And I remember one particular was with Merck, and post that conversation, we did a debrief to talk about how it went, what we could do better. And one of the aspects that was brought up, and it was brought up by this amazing sales leader, Chris Riley, is he said, what's in it for this person? What are they trying to accomplish? And at the time I was 21 years old, and I would think about selling something is, you have an itch, let's sell them a scratcher, right? And that's a very binary way to think about providing a solution to someone's need. And when you're dealing with a giant enterprise with an enterprise-based project, they will make decisions not just based on does our technical capabilities align to their technical success criteria. They'll do what's in interest of their career. Maybe they're an empire builder, right? That was a term I learned back at the Varga days, where 10 years ago, you would have people saying, I'm going to buy an on-prem tool like a Fortify or a Checkmarks, and I want to have a team of security practitioners out there just scanning away at different applications and be able to say, look at this, I've really made it. I've got a team of 50 people and I'm doing, this is amazing. Right. And so you have to really understand where someone comes from. So for me, to kind of belabor this point, every person in my family is in sales. Best salesperson out of everyone is my mother. So engaging, so empathetic. She could disarm the meanest of people. And so in my childhood, I was around sellers that really focus on empathy. And my mom always said to me, the golden rule, Sean, golden rule, treat others like you want to be treated. And so that's just was my environment. Right. And I'm definitely a heart on my sleeve kind of person. I really enjoy helping people solve big problems. And so that's where I came from. And where I want to go is I wake up every day loving the world of AppSec, which is so difficult. And so you're faced with these amazing challenges. And then it's really rewarding when you're able to help someone, move their AppSec practice forward through different phases of maturity. So that was like my origin story, if you will. And then what I shared on the Absolute AppSec podcast is I knew I wanted to be in sales, and I have an uncle who was insanely successful at Oakley Sunglasses in the 90s. He owned the New York City territory. Oakley Sunglasses in the 90s, New York City territory. So he did very well for himself, and that's what I thought I wanted to do.
I've imagined, yeah. Oakley's had a grip on the population during that time.
It's big time for any 80s, 90s babies. Oakley's with the thing. And so I did an internship with Smith Optics, and I showed up the first day in a suit, and I'm like, hey, I'm ready to make a name for myself. And the wonderful West Coast manager was in a bathing suit and said, I thought we'd just go surfing every day and I'll sign off on your internship. And I was like, no, I need to prove myself in life. Let's go work. And so I was like, this is not my industry. Long story short, I'm in my sophomore year of college, and my dad had been in tech for his entire career, primarily CRM. He said, Sean, there's something going on with IT security. So this is 2006, 2007. I think that's a really good discipline that's going to grow in need generally. And he's like, my recommendation is you go to the biggest IT security company and build that foundation. So I went to RSA Security at a school, learned, 101 IT, 101 sales. They had every solution under the sun, SIM, adaptive authentication, the tokens, of course, and whatnot. Really cut my teeth. And then I got into direct selling from there. I was just a cold caller back in those RSA days. And then the last 10 years of my career, and why we're here, is I found this really special niche in application security. So I had wonderful time during the golden years of Veracode about 10 years ago for about 3+ years. And then went to, and where we met, Ken, I was at Secure Code Warrior for 4 years, which was a wonderful time in my career. And now I'm back in the scanning space and just celebrated my 1 year at Cycode and really loving it. So I kind of describe it in a way as there's no wrong way to live your life. You just have to recognize where you're meant to be. And I couldn't be a dentist just doing 8 cavities every day for the rest of my life. I'd much rather doing AppSec, which is, very complex problem set, complex group of, differing priorities and people. And it just makes it very rewarding. So that's kind of my deeper origin story, if that's helpful at all.
It is. I actually have a follow-up too, because, you've talked a lot about getting to know the individual that you're selling to, and you want to know everything, right? Like your whole life story, like everything about that person. You want to make sure that I guess what I'm saying is, it sounds like you have realized that the focus is on that person. And I bring this up because I do have a question here, but just to walk this back, usually what I see is when people talk about ICPs, ideal for Sean knows this, but for everybody else who may not know this, an ideal customer profile, right? Usually I see people kind of focus on the company. So the vertical, maybe it's the size of the company, maybe there's different components of that company that they focus on. But I think my question is do you focus on both, or is that like, does filtering by like some attribute of an org get you to like a more narrow list, and then you decide from there, once you've got your like filtered down list, who are the right individuals, not organizations from that list of organizations? Like, what's the thinking there? Just because, like, again, you're really focused on the individual, whereas I've seen a lot of strategies focused more at organizations, and I actually, I have a bias. I do think the individual is really the key, but I'm curious for how you came to that, like how you see this, if there's distinct things, or yeah, just whatever you can fill in the blanks on there.
Yeah. No, I love that question. So you're saying, how do I determine both what type of customer works best for my solution? Both, am I looking at the type of company, or am I focusing more on the role, or maybe a little bit of both? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Because yeah, like yeah, exactly. That's exactly, like, do you focus on both? Do you focus on one over the other? Does one lead you to the other? Like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I love that. So, the topic today is, I've come up with a quasi OWASP top 10 for AppSec sales, if you will, right? Being in it for 10 years, I've seen what's made a successful company, a successful salesperson, vis-a-vis a successful customer deploying that said technology. In number 3 on that list, and it follows the methodology of an OWASP list, number 1 is priority, and you go down, is show me who deployed your solution successfully, and I'll show you your future customers. So that's really how I think about where to spend my time when I'm selling any solution, right? If we all came together and create a gene DNA sequencing company that just did my DNA, it would just be selling to me, right? Or, on the flip side of that coin, I saw a really cool stat today that AWS or Amazon has the world's largest subscription business. It's like $42 billion a year in annual revenue from subscriptions. And then next was like Costco at 7 billion. It was just like, so obviously they're on the flip side of that coin, where their ideal customer profile is pretty much every person, at least in the United States and the geos they serve. So when you get into, say, AppSec, which has traditionally been pretty niche, I would just, every time I go into a company, when I came into Cycode, Secure Code Warrior, into Veracode, you just look, okay, who's having success with our solution? Who's renewing? Who's expanding? Who's saying they're hitting the goals that they wanted to achieve when they deployed a solution? That's really the starting point. And then looking at the particular, like, I like to use Zoom Info because they have not a complex way of looking at verticals. They have primary verticals, so there's only like 25 of them, and they're very high level. And then you can get down to the second tier. So if you say financial services, that can include banking and hedge funds and everything under the sun on that. So I look at that particularly of, okay, if this is the customer we're having success with, let me go see how many of those type of companies I have in the territory I own. And then there's certainly a person that owns the problem set that you're selling to. So for AppSec, you're looking for the person that's going to be held responsible for the security of their applications. But that's another aspect to it. And another part of the OWASP Top 10 for AppSec Sales is, it's never just a one person decision. There's 1,000 other decision makers, DevOps, AppSec, or app dev, that are involved in that process. So my direct answer to you, Ken, is it all starts with who's bought and been successful, running that list, and then looking for the right people to sell within those accounts, if that's a helpful answer.
Yeah. It sounds like, just to recap, so I echo back to you, you're saying basically we will have, through our process of lead generation, locking in initial conversations, up to the point where we've got a contract, we've deployed successfully within an organization, it worked for that organization. So maybe we'll look at similar verticals, maybe we'll look at companies with the similar attributes in terms of like the same amount of devs or the same tech stack or whatever it is, like same sort of processes. Once you've ironed out that list, then you'll go through and you'll meet with those folks. Now, this is where my follow-up to the follow-up question comes in, is disqualification versus qualification. Because I've realized in my life of sales, obviously as a founder, I do a lot of sales, right? I've also, so I've realized, and as part of that, like for me anyways, disqualifying people is almost as important, if not sometimes more important, quickly disqualifying than qualifying. Because like, I don't know how it is for you, but I've got attributes of a buyer I find to be valuable. And if they don't have those attributes, they're probably not the right fit for us as an individual, not as an org, as a vertical. So do you feel the same way? Is it for you more just like, no, if I'm within that company, like, or if I'm within a similar attributes of the company we had success with, and I'm talking to folks within there, I can probably make it work with somebody in there and then find that right person. Or or is it for you like similar, where you're just like disqualified? All right, you have the right attributes as an individual.
100%. Yeah. I mean, the golden rule again, treat people like you want to be treated, right? Don't waste anybody's time if you see a glaring blocker, right? And so number 4 on the list is a living document. So something that it had epiphany on.
Oh, hey, sorry, real quick. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I do want to preface this. We're going to be showing the OWASP top 10 for AppSec Sales that Sean put together. So that's what you're going to see popping up on the screen.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no worries. So yeah, number 4 is a living document. And I come from a very small family. We originally grew up in Connecticut. My dad changed jobs when I was 8 and we moved to Massachusetts. And my parents had an opportunity to design and build a modest home in Massachusetts. And so as an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, I went to those architecture meetings and just got bored, but listened to them say, oh no, the window needs to be here and this needs to be there, right? And why do you have a blueprint when building a house? It's so complex. There's a bajillion pieces to it. And so when I was at Secure Code Warrior, I finally got the maturity and the confidence to say, after my Veracode days, like, wow, there are so many things can go wrong in my ability to try to align my solution to a particular environment. I need a living document that's customer facing, that's like a blueprint that I can help map out all of the ever expanding tech stack of a company, not just their languages and frameworks, but what's their CI/CD pipeline look like, their SCMs, are they on-prem, are they hosted? There's just 1,000 different things. And so that document enables me, I 99% of the time I'm sharing my screen and I'm typing the answers as someone talks. And 99% of the time, when you do this, you see the people on the other side of the screen go, oh, right? A sales rep is finally listening to me, and they're helping me project manage this project, which, AppSec people are the most busy people in the world. So you're accomplishing all these wonderful activities at the same time. And let me get to your answer. In that living document, it becomes really apparent if someone writes in, Dunkin' Donuts cappuccino language or something so obscure that you can't support as a scanner or as a training company or whatever, you can quickly write that down and say, hey, Ken, wonderful conversation. Sounds like you have all the pain points we can solve, but we don't support Dunkin' Donuts cappuccino language right now. It doesn't look like it's on the roadmap. We can't really help. I would love to help you, but it's just, it's obvious. So that living document helps me flesh out any particular blockers. And environments are complex, so there's always going to be minor things that companies are looking for that you're like, oh yeah, that's is that a deal breaker, or is that just something that you'd like to see out of our solution in the next 12 months? And yep, that's where we're heading. So you kind of have to balance it. But does that help answer your question?
It definitely does. Yeah. I mean, and I don't want to hog all the time, Seth. If you like, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about a lot of these aspects. So
and I know this is like near and dear to your heart right now, right? As far as like your day to day and what's going on. The thing that I keep harkening back to, like Sean, as you talk, is that this doesn't only apply to like SaaS solutions and technical solutions, right? Like if if we're coming in, and my world right now is the services side, right? Like services very much, most of this, or all of it still applies, right? It's just a matter of what it is that we're actually doing. And, specifically, right, like we didn't talk a lot about the empathy section on that, right? I know you have a little bit as far as like not wasting people's time and, being very upfront on this is what you're dealing with, and then identifying some of the solutions. I think the living document that you're calling out there also applies to that, right? Like just being very succinct and being very aware of what your customers actually want. Like rolling up to that empathy becomes so important, because I feel like that's where most of our sales come from as a third party, as a consulting company, is just being like, hey, we're here to help, right? And if we can't help you, that's fine. We'll move on, right? Like AppSec is incredibly complex, and there's like so many other organizations. There's so much out there to do that it's not just like, you're not going to live or die by a single customer or a single client. And if you do, then you're way too focused, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to come to you and they'd be like, hey, I need the world's most advanced COBOL research team, right? And you're not going to be like, all right, sign me up. That's our that's our
bread and butter. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and like my whole thinking with this, the reason I asked about the individual themselves is because another thing you've got on your list is like basically like success lives and dies with the customer, right? And it's like, man, I'll give you a concrete example of my own failure in this space with like the individual. So what I've determined are some attributes of who our buyers are as an individual, right? And that's important, I think, because in this case, it'll become pretty clear. So like with this one potential customer, we set up, we do these policy thing. We have policies that are enforced on your code as a change, basically. And so they set up some pretty basic ones that were just kind of copy pasta. And then the idea is that you go and you make some enhancements as you need to, right? So you don't just set it and forget it. You do some additional work. Well, learnings of like how to have who's the right person, how to define success criteria, how to make sure they get through success criteria, right? Well, at that time, I didn't really think about any of that, right? So it's sort of like, yeah, all right, you set up some policies, and if you like the tool, you'll buy the tool, great, right? What happens? Well, some other group evaluates it. The tool doesn't get updated by your contact, right? Who's supposed to be engaging in this demo, and they get to the end of it, and it's like, well, yeah, that group didn't care much for that because it was a little noisier than it was supposed to be. And it's like, oh, well, did you go and like make the edits and like update it so that it would perform correctly? Well, no, I was pretty busy. I was just going to let them figure that out. And like, obviously I didn't know that ahead of time. And so you start to realize like, oh, I need a person who's going to be like really engaged in this. Somebody who's like almost like a future facing, like really involved kind of person, right? And somebody that has the ability to do that. Because a lot of people don't. You said it yourself, a lot of people are busy. So sometimes your criteria for an individual might literally be like, you can't be too busy to do this demo, You can't be like so overwhelmed that you don't have time to implement this. And that's why I start asking you about like, how much is it the org? How much is it the individual? Do you just move on when you can't find the right individual, or do you pursue trying to find another individual within the org? So you definitely answered it, but I'm just filling in like why I kind of come across as like, yes, success criteria has to be set up. There's got to be proper hand-holding, it feels like, during those demos. But for me, it's like the person seems to be a pretty big factor in all of this, right? Like their attributes.
And you know what?
It's personal or what the org gives them.
And it goes, and I would take that further, right? Is I learned this from Chris Weissopel. He's like, application development is an art and a science, and writing just quality performant code is super hard, right? Let alone secure code. And so that's why number one for certain is empathy. You have to understand how complex writing applications is and how much technical debt there is. one of the big epiphanies I've had in my career was Vericode's one of their big value drivers, if you will. You want to use a salesy term, but claim to fames was they had this amazing readout team that I think you got like 1 or 2 readouts, 45-minute calls for free, and then you could buy a bunch of readout calls. But so I probably was on maybe 40 calls over 3 years where a static scan would run, or SCA or DAS, whatever, and we would provide that developer or group of developers that own the code access for a 45-minute tutor session from one of the AppSec experts. And they were truly, I would call them AppSec experts. They were experts in the scanning type and Vericode and the problem set and the language and stuff like that. And if you think about any aspect of your life where you're trying to do something difficult, let's say put together furniture or solve your finances or, whatever it is, if you can get an expert's time, you're going to be asking a million questions like, oh, how do I do this? Like, because you're obviously, oh my God, this is amazing that I have access to this expert. Like, let's solve this problem because I'm kind of lost. No developers ever spoke. It was like crickets every single call. And I couldn't believe it. And at the time, it just didn't really reflect a lot on why that was taking place. But in hindsight, there's opinion, informed opinion, and then there's facts, right? So I don't have the facts to prove this, and I don't think it's pure opinion. I think it's my professional opinion that most developers just struggle to know how to write performant quality code, let alone to get to the level of start talking about, they need to sanitize their inputs, they need to protect against, whatever vulnerability. And so that's why they don't talk. And that's inherently the what makes AppSec so much fun and such a hard problem and such a headache for AppSec leaders is they're talking to a cohort of developers that most are struggling to understand how to write performant and quality code. And then they're having to come in and say, on top of this, you need to secure it, or we found this type of risk in your code, and this is how you resolve it. And so to tie it to what you said, Ken, about number 2 on the list, success lives and dies with your customer, because this world that we live in is so difficult. When you provide, sell the solution to a customer, whatever it is across the AppSec stack, you need to work with them to prove that your theory that you can help them achieve their goals actually comes to fruition. And that's important for a company, because then you see, oh, we really can do this. We are doing this over and over again, helping customers do X, Y, Z successfully. And you do that. And it's important in AppSec, because AppSec is such a tight-knit community. You need to work to help customers be successful and achieve their goals. And one of the best lessons I learned when in my interview process at Secure Code Warrior, the CEO said, I asked the CEO, how do I make you proud? Right? Like, in hindsight, I'm a year in, how do I make you proud? And he was like, the AppSec community, this is 7 years ago, whatever it is very small. I much rather you maybe bring in a deal a month later than it should or something, when they're actually ready to be successful and all the stakeholders are aligned, rather than forcing the solution, getting the sale, but having them fail because they weren't ready, right? That was particular to secure code training, and you really had to have everybody on the same page on what you were looking to accomplish, because you can provide secure code training and no one's going to take it. Yeah, it has to be mandated. So that's the context I would provide to the greater theme of when you get into the struggles of selling a scanner, and this person's perspective is this, and another team's like, oh, this, I think it's noisy, and then another team is saying, oh, actually, this is the most high fidelity scanner we've had in the world. It's a lot of complexity. It's not easy, and fun things are typically, pain is where growth is, and that's what makes every day so exciting, if that's helpful.
Yeah, you said so many things in there that I could just touch on for such a long time. Like, just customer success drift. We could go into a whole tangent on that. There's the aspect of, are they ready for what you're about to give them? There's the differences of opinions and whose opinions are going to be the ones that matter. There's a lot of aspects of it. And you're right. Like, that's actually, it's funny because as a business owner, I go through this all the time. I'm like, yeah, I think that org, based off of where they're at, because like you get to know, like what you're saying with empathy and getting to know your customers and getting to know their situation, you get to know these people even before you've ever sold, right? It takes time. It takes time to build these relationships, and you get to know like what are their pains and their struggles and what they're dealing with. And so, yeah, there are times where it's like, no, you're not ready for us right now. You have too much going on. Like, there's too much in motion. You guys have some big overhaul projects going on. I've been there. I've definitely been there more than once, right? I get it. I get where you're coming from, and it is a danger if we were to go and try to get into your org now. There's also a danger of just having enough sales. So it is like a balancing act, right? And it is difficult, but yeah,
well,
like
I would.
yeah.
So Ken, the other thing that I'd like to tie together here is, like, I know we're talking about sales, but this could be a discussion on just overall, like, building an AppSec program, right? Like, you're going into an organization as a third party and you want to help them create application security in general. And all of these same things apply, right? Like, you have to understand that developers are already overwhelmed. You've got to understand that the security team has basically been tasked with yet another item to do, and they may or may not have somebody in AppSec. So you've got to do all of these things to understand what's going on before you can introduce a solution that'll be helpful to that organization. And if it's not custom, if it's not going to help them, you actually introduce more risk that they're going to become either less secure, or they're going to ignore it, or they're going to write it off because you cried wolf, or whatever you did in that situation. I mean, from a sales perspective, it might mean, okay, we're never going to sell into that organization. But from an overall organization perspective, it means, hey, our developers now don't take security seriously, right? Or they're going to, they're just not going to spend any time on it. And so it feels like this crosses a lot of other thresholds besides just sales, right? It's just in general, helping build a program is a very, very difficult task. And sales is one portion of that can help. And it's got to be the right solution at the right time.
100%. Yeah, it's just crazy complex situation of understanding what a company's goals are and priorities. And that's why AppSec, traditionally started in financial services, due to regulation, due to knowing that they were the biggest target out there. Same with major insurers and telcos and the major software vendors. And that's the thing that's really exciting too, I would say, about application security today is, when I was at Varga 10 years ago, it was a very small set of customers that you could sell to that actually had a sophisticated enough SDLC to think about securing it. And now it's like every single company out there has developers, and they're looking for a easy, coherent way to get their arms around what is, we've got these developers. I was talking to a major cement company 3 or 4 months back or longer, and the CTO was like, I have like 300 devs. Like, it's unbelievable. I'm a cement company. Like, what is this? And it's just everybody. I mean, software is truly now eating the world, and that's the exciting part, is seeing there's lots of types of companies that needs our help and that need to secure it. So
yeah, to your point, Sean, right? Like, we've been pulled into assessments for like landscaping companies, right? Like, as a third party, consultant, because they have developers, they've got a solution that they give to their customers that's homegrown, and they're like, oh crap, we have PCI. Like, to your point about like financial markets, or the finance, in general, like starting AppSec, you could you could say that even OWASP came about or rose to prominence because of PCI, right? Because the financial markets and the finance companies were so concerned about security. Yeah, I like, so it's not surprising to me, but it's great to see from an industry perspective that these companies are finally thinking about security, right? Like, it might not be a solution that is available today, or right, like they may not be ready for it, to your point, but at least they're thinking about it.
And at the end of the day, a lot of these companies, not to cut you off, all they really own is code. So if they're just getting into coding, it's not like they built out some big data center and they're worried about securing hardware and networks and all the like. They're usually iterating in a way that everything is hosted somewhere else, but they only own the code. And so that's what that's the main thing they're secure. I mean, that's what Bill Brown, the CIO at Veracode, said in the back of the day. He's like, let me tell you about the importance of application security. He's like, I don't own anything other than code. And that's really what my job is securing, because, all Veracode's scanning was in a very secure, third-party data center, Fort Knox, the highest level security ever invented. So yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Well, and it's only going to become more of that, right? Like, everybody develops into the cloud, right? Like, all these solutions, it's how they put their skin on things. And I mean, even in the AI world nowadays, right? Like, the only thing that you really own is your interactions and the way that you connect these different pieces together and how you present that to customers overall. So AppSec is just it's becoming more ingrained in every company's life cycle, right? It has to be.
Big time. No, big time. It's an exciting time. I say all the time, I was mentioning earlier, I'm in the eye of the storm. I have 3 kiddos, all under 4 years old, and which I'm really, very blessed. And what was I just going to say with that? Oh, geez.
Well, basically, you're in the middle of a chaotic time, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, just a chaotic time. I was going to tie it back to something you said, Seth, but as I was just saying, when you have 3 kids in a full-time job, you start to lose your mind a little bit. So that's why you got to have the living document, so you can write everything down.
Yeah. Recording is important. Like, one of the questions that I had for you is, like, this ability, you've got your living document, right? Like, it feels like that's how you're kind of tracking these, like, relationships, right? For lack of a better term, right? You've got a living document, track your relationship with a potential customer or with a customer, right? What has been the effective way to actually, understand the stakeholders, right? Like, and understand what's important to an organization. Like, how do you go about approaching that? I know you mentioned that you've done cold calls in the past, but like, yeah, my question to you is somebody that, like, does, is involved in, like, sales from a services perspective, is how do you identify those people and move on quickly? I think that goes back to kind of Ken's question as well, as about, like, whether or not an organization is a fit for your specific solution. Like, how do you quickly identify that, and then how do you move on from that?
Yeah, no, excellent question. So I call it the elements of a living document, and I appreciate that question. There's three core elements of every living document that I create when I'm engaged in a conversation with a company. It's the different cohorts of people. So I'll have a slide for security, a slide for DevOps, app dev, and a slide for other people like legal counsel, procurement person, just so I know all these people that I need to manage in the process. And I have their name, their title, and then I also have their location, because the beauty of how the world works today is you don't have to just look only in your backyard for great talent. You can, look anywhere. So everybody's located everywhere these days. So it's important to be, sensitive to their time zones. So there's that component. And then there's a slide on what their tech stack looks like. So their SCMs, their pipeline, what they're using for languages or IDs, all those different things. And then there's a slide for their AppSec pain points, goals, what metrics are failing, how will they measure success of a new solution, where they want to deploy their security scanning today. Is it in the PR? Is it a pre-commit hook? Is it in the IDE? Is it, all the above? So it's really granular information like that. How do they rank their applications, P1 through P4? All these different aspects. And then there's also a slide that I use on their purchase process, which is really begins at the beginning of, a lot of companies want to put an NDA in place after the initial call or for the initial call. So I'll have that step. And then as you move through, like maybe before you POC the solution, you have to go through a security review. So I'll make sure I document, check that off. And then each company is unique in how they do the technical buying of a solution. And there's always processes. And so I document that all out. And it's, as I, lost my train of thought earlier, when you're having multiple of these conversations, it's no one can remember everything. And why would you handicap yourself? So that's why I write everything down. Just so when there's a term in sales called audible ready. You always want to be ultimately audible ready so that you can speak to, whoever I can, whether it's getting on with the DevOps leader. Like right before this, I was speaking to DevOps leaders at a company that's evaluating new solutions, and they never, talked to Cycode before, and I had to get them up to speed on what conversations we've had and what I know about their company and their tech stack and all this stuff. And it allows me to be really audible ready. And that's a big part of it. It's just always being nimble and giving the customer the confidence that, hey, I know this, and I know, I don't rely heavily on introductions, in that if I get on a call with 10 people, I say, okay, let's go through each person, spend 5 minutes describing who you are, and then we'll have 5 minutes to demo to you. Everybody's on LinkedIn. I can find everybody before the call, and I can share that, oh, I know, Larry, you're this, and blah, blah, blah. Can you give me, and enables me to move beyond the formalities of what your title is and just get into the meat of, like, what are you struggling with today? What are your MBOs? And that's another one to advance in the list. Number 7 is understand AppSec, SLOs, SLAs, and MBOs, right? So a lot of companies still don't have, or maybe they have, but they don't adhere to, or they struggle with adhering to service level objectives or agreements on when to fix a certain type of critical high, medium severity finding. And then also understanding, for the DevOps folks I was talking to before, I was asking, like, from your perspective, and this is, not so much a security question, is like, what metrics are you gold on? Like, how does the business measure what you're managing, right? And so having that information is so important, because I'm able to put myself in their shoes and, relate, their MBOs are not necessarily AppSec only MBOs. They're going to be more around number of releases out, the measure of code quality, and code security, and just got to understand how whatever you're talking to relates to them, if that's helpful.
It is. And I think, like, because this is actually a fairly significant topic that has always been a thing, as far as I can remember anyways, which is a complaint amongst practitioners that they can't just sign up for a service and get going and just, use it, right? They're like, I always have to do 4 or 5 sales meetings, and then this, that, and the other. And look, I've been all of these people at one point. I think we all have, right? You evolve, you learn new things. And I get now why that's not as much of a thing as you think it would be. And a lot of that has to do with the things that you're saying. It's like, I could let you, I'm gonna give my initial leading towards where I like my thoughts on this, but I obviously we have you on, we want to hear your thoughts. But my thoughts are, like, you mentioned SLAs, SLOs, and MBOs, and a lot of other things that really tie back to, like, you're understanding the organization's requirements. Like, what is required to be the right product? Because I might not be the right product for you. What are the internal processes, politics, team structure? Need to know all of that, because that's going to influence sort of like who's evaluating what, who's going to get value out of this, who's going to do X, Y, Z as part of our different gates as part of this process. And it is a process, right? And you're doing all these things because you want to make sure not only do they just, it's not, do you just buy the thing? It's that, will you buy this thing also next year? Like, because we did a good job of rolling this out and working with you all and whatnot. Whereas with a PLG motion or a product led growth motion where people just sign up and get a subscription going, the thing is like, my thought on that is that's okay if you want to just click some buttons and get to know, like, if I click a button, does it do this thing? The problem is, though, is that doesn't tell you a whole lot about how it's going to work in an operationally at scale and in a production sense, right? Like, once there's real production traffic flowing through there, when there's multiple teams involved, it doesn't tell you a whole lot about, and you can't really like help guide towards a successful moment when it's just sign up, try it, whatever. I agree that there are products that absolutely should have just like a sign up, get going, put in a credit card, because they're simplistic. There's other products, and like I would say a Cycode is that, definitely a dry run security is that, where you need somebody to help make sure that it's successful to the end. But what are your thoughts on the complaints from people about, like, why do I have to go to 4 or 5 different sales meetings just to get to like a demo and try out the thing? Like, I'm genuinely like, I know the community would love to hear this from you and anybody else is willing to talk about it.
Yeah, no, there's a fine balance. I would trifurcate that topic into a lot of different areas. Where to get started? So I'm taking a lot of anecdotes from Varga just because that was a really foundational start in my AppSec life. So I'm going to pull from another one there. Bob Brennan, the CEO back in the day, just a wonderful human being. Miss that guy a lot. He said the perfect analogy for AppSec. We are selling diet and exercise, right? Obviously, one of the most successful things in the pharmaceutical industry right now is PLG1, right? The Wegovy product for weight loss. That's a simple activity. You want something, it seems safe, you go on a website, you buy it, it comes to you, you take it. When you're selling AppSec, you're selling a new way that they're doing software development. And so that's, again, all of the 10 things of OWASP Top 10 for AppSec Sales is, I know that a lot of AppSec practitioners have been burnt by really poor sales experiences or vendor experiences. And that's always going to be the case. But I would say that as a whole, we're getting better. And obviously the customer has more power than they ever did beyond, 10, 20 years ago, where they couldn't have the internet and look for information on something.
But have a million options available for that one thing that they need.
Yeah. So there has to be a trust factor to say, hey, trust us that we know our solution, and that let's take the time to understand what your unique situation is so that we can help you down the path of how we align to your success. And it's kind of like being the concierge of the process of helping when you're selling to a larger enterprise, where there's not just the AppSec leader, but there's another security leader, and then there's a CISO and their DevOps team and the CIO and the CTO, and there's all these different dynamics, and you have to help someone pull it all together and provide a packaged solution. As you came to us and said, you can do this, we can, you need this solution, and here's how we align to those needs. And then there's certainly, when you were talking about ICP earlier, there are certainly companies that are, startups or businesses where they're just dipping their toe into security, and they're, they're literally deploying a SaaS scanner because someone they sell to says they have to have a SaaS scanner in place, and all the developers are just going to ignore all the results, but they're just looking for the ability to say to said customer that they do SaaS scanning, right? And those types of organizations should go get the open source or entry level solutions that allow them to just deploy and use either in a free manner or a very low cost manner. So you got to know who you're selling to and what your solution fits, and there's not a perfect answer to the problem on it. But I will in closing thoughts on and I've talked about this recently. We have a wonderful person on our team that was at Veracode for a long time, Eric Kim, and he was tasked back in the day of comparing Veracode. This is a long time ago. Veracode's onboarding process from initial outreach to deploying the solution in a POC, and he looked at all the other providers out there, and companies are interested in saying, like, how do we make this efficient? And it goes back to putting yourself in the shoes of the customer. Don't give them an added step if it's no value for either the vendor or the customer. You have to be focused on that. One of the best experiences I ever had in my career was after RSA Security. I worked at a company called vKernel, virtualization capacity planning and monitoring space, and it was bought by Quest Software. That was a really fun time. And I sat next to the CEO, and every single morning, the CEO would meet with the CMO and the head of engineering, and they would say, how many clicks does it take to download our software? What is the problem space that our customers have today? How is it different from yesterday? What are their options to solve today? And you have to be looking at those specific examples. But again, it's like, who are you selling to? Are you selling to a smaller market where they have the de facto options are to deploy very quickly without any interaction? Or is it more of a, more enterprise type sale, mid-market type sale where they're signing up to get some expertise?
This actually, Sean, this leads. Okay, I probably only have time, at least for me, to have one more question. Seth might have time for another question. But listen, this leads into, and you had said, like, there's no perfect solution, there's no silver bullet, but also, it really depends, enterprise versus whatever. And this kind of brings me to my question, which is like as I said before we hopped on, I've been reading this book. It's been a really good one, Selling the Will. Thank you, Mike McCabe, for the recommendation. And they talk about, they say something that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. They say I'm going to get the quote. There is no such thing as the perfect salesperson who is universally effective with all customers. So they talk about, they break it down into like 4 different styles, like closer, wizard, relationship builder, captain, and crew, right? But I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that statement of there is no, like, basically universal salesperson who can hit all, like, sell to any customer and any product? And like, what does that mean? Like, why would that be? Or is that even true?
God, that's like, a life-changing question. I feel like, I would say my parents took a perspective where I wasn't a very gifted person in school, and they always instilled in me that, Sean, the way we look at humans is, if someone wants to become a doctor, and even if they don't have the intellect of an Einstein, they work hard enough, they can become a doctor. And so I've always been a believer that if someone has the drive in the intellectual curiosity, that's something that our sales leader Seth talks about all the time, is having that high IQ, that interest, is you can do anything. You can sell anything, right? Now, what AppSec is so predictable, it's unbelievable. In AppSec, because it's so complex, understanding and how does an SDLC work, understanding how your technology works that you sell, understanding the complex sales process, you want to have an unfair advantage in having that domain expertise. So, I enjoy AppSec, and I have built up that domain expertise, and I want to just compound that. Warren Buffett, the 10th wonder of the world, or whatever it is compound interest. It's compound knowledge. So I'm a big believer of both things. I'm a believer that anybody can sell anything, but it also is an unfair advantage to have domain expertise. And also, it goes back to what's someone's drive, and what was their childhood like, and where do they want to go. I worked with wonderful people in the past. I won't name companies or anything like that, but they were working in a product line that was making, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and they would come in and sell the same simple solution and come in at 8, clock out at 5, and weren't necessarily making life-changing money, but that was a good life for them, and that was a happy life, right? So you want to pattern match that type of drive, that type of person to the solution set. So you wouldn't take a person like that and throw them in necessarily AppSec. You would take them to, a much more established company that a little bit more simple and things of that nature. I don't know if that's a helpful answer.
Definitely is. I think with enterprises, you're talking about much more complex sales that require beyond just the initial sale. There's going to be a lot involved over years of a relationship. And there's going to be times where there's going to be certain scenarios where something happened, and look, the salesperson is the first line of defense and has to go make that right, whatever that thing might have been. And so that's a different job than somebody who's the rock star entrepreneurial spirit comes in, sells a brand new thing that never existed before, just different personas for different needs. But it's helpful to hear it from you, with your experience with everything you've done, and with your through the lens of Sean Varga. It's definitely helpful to hear. And you got to remember, I've spent a lot of time doing sales. Seth has spent a lot of time doing. I say a lot of time. Look, I suck at it still. Seth might be better at it, but there are even far less experienced people listening on here that also, for one reason or another, have to sort of learn a little about it or want to learn about it. So this is really, really, just want to put out there that everything you've said is very, very, very enlightening and helpful. I feel like, I especially want to chop up this. I put out the section where you talk about why people can't just sign up and they actually have to go through the process.
Yeah, because it's an interesting discussion, and I do want to be cognizant of your time, Sean. Right, we are we are at an hour. Whoops, Ken just decided to leave. He'll be back, I'm sure, shortly.
I've got about 12, 15 minutes, so I'm doing good.
Yeah. Okay, but I do want to give you an opportunity to speak about how people can talk to you or reach out to you if they have further questions, and then also other things that you would like to promote before we close things out today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm heavy into LinkedIn. I'll give a quick anecdote about social media. So I'm an only child. Unfortunately, both my grandfathers passed when I was really young, so I didn't really have those fireside chats. So I've really relied heavily into podcasts because I can listen to wonderful people and that fireside chat approach. And I listened to this amazing interview of the person that ran PR for New York City when 9/11 happened. And I would call him a major leader in media, right? And he said, out of all the social media platforms out there, and I would say from a business context, LinkedIn is most powerful. So, find me, follow me, add me on LinkedIn. It's a great way to talk. I was, a great person from the UK reached out to me today, asked me about sales, getting into sales advice. He happened to add me on LinkedIn, and shot him back some quick thoughts, and he really appreciated it. And I was like, hey, karma rules the world, right? Mm-hmm. So find me on LinkedIn. Also, if you're going to Black Hat, one of the things I love about Cycode is I've been in love with our founders. They just have huge empathy for our customers, and we've had a lot of success with the program of Product Security All-Stars. And so we're hosting a breakfast. There's not a bajillion seats, but I dropped a link in there. So if anybody's going and wants to join up, it's not necessarily hosted by us in the sense that there are 2 product security leaders that will be there, and it's pretty casual. So feel free to use that link to join in. And yeah, I would say for AppSec and app dev is moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour. Like what customers and companies are looking for in an AppSec solution, I've never seen it like change so quickly. So if, I would say to everyone, if you haven't looked at Cycode at all, or if you saw us a year ago or more, definitely take another look at us. I'm really enjoying it here. Been here about a year now, and yeah, things are going well, and just love the space. And I know I was going to say earlier with talking about my kids. I always kid that my daughter, who's 2.5, I always say that she'll probably be an AppSec because it's not getting easier, right? AI is not making code more quality or more performant, more secure. It's creating an easier way to push out just a lot more noise. So I think if you want job security and an interesting job, AppSec's where it's at. It's very rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Right. Like, I mean, I think we can all speak to that from an industry perspective.
I teeter from one extreme to the other. So I go full nihilist to like full optimist constantly and everywhere in between.
You got to be a glutton for punishment. You got to wake up every day and just know it's going to be, hard going.
If there's one freaking badge in this world I've earned, it's that I can take a beating. Keep going.
That's what's great. It's funny. I was thinking in preparation for this, I had, it was a long time ago, so I don't think he listens to podcasts, but I had an interesting college lacrosse coach that, who told me in hindsight that he was very mean to us as a team because everyone would be suffering towards a certain enemy. Right. And so it really
shared enemy.
Yeah, exactly.
Galvanizes.
Yep.
Right. It really brothers and sisters and humans in arms. So no, it's been a wonderful experience being on this podcast. I love the freeformness, and let me love to maybe do a check-in in a couple of years, see how AppSec has changed. But thank you so much for the time. And
you don't have to wait a couple of years, but if you whenever you want to check back in, and I definitely will try to meet up with you too. I know you're gonna be pretty swamped, but I'll try to meet up too during like the Vegas time frame, and Seth might as well. So
yeah
definitely.
Well,
I'm sorry, Seth, go ahead.
No. Yeah. It's, wherever we're at, we will be having at least some like podcast meetups as well, like during that week. More than happy to, we'll share the invite out with everyone basically. And would love to see you down there in Vegas.
Yeah, most definitely. No, this is wonderful, gentlemen. I hope you have a great summer, and hope it's not super hot. It's like been the hot summer everywhere. So hope you're enjoying yourself, and all the best to the AppSec community.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining today. Reach out to Sean, jump into Slack if you want to continue the conversation. You want to talk about selling the wheel and all the other things, or talk about AppSec sales and sales in general. It's super interesting. So, Ken, any final thoughts before we close it today?
Just thank you to the listeners. Appreciate you. Thank you to Sean. Sean, again, one of my favorite people. So thanks for coming on, man.
Of course. Right. No, you guys are the best. I appreciate you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Okay. We'll see everybody online. Thanks.